Hello, my name is Beck and welcome to my January wrap up. I didn't read too many books this month, so I want to include a little mini wrap up of what I finished at the very end of 2020 because that didn't quite make it in, and then at the very end of the video I'm going to cover what I'm currently reading as well. But for the first book in this video, I'm going to be talking about my first read of 2021, and that is Across the Green Grass Fields by Seanan McGuire. This is the 6th book, I think, in her Every Heart a Doorway series. The basic premise for each of these books is kids go through magical doorways into worlds that suit them down to their soul, and then eventually they have the option to come back. Sometimes they're tricked into doing it, and then they have to come back and re-assimilate effectively. In the first book, there is like a magical school vibe that kind of continues throughout the books as well, but in this one it felt very much a standalone compared to what I've read so far, and for that reason I gave it a lesser rating than the previous books. All of the others so far have clocked at least a 4 stars, but unfortunately this one clocked a 3.5. Not that that's a bad rating, but I just kind of had my expectations a little bit too high. And this book, while it was interesting and I loved the core message and the themes, the book in general with the plot, it felt like it wrapped up very quickly at the end, and I think this is also the shortest book in the series so far. All of them are novellas, which is also saying something that this was short because it was significantly shorter than the other books, and I just didn't love it as much as the others. It felt like the main character was established enough but didn't learn enough while they were in this particular world. Although I do like the scope of the world and I always enjoy the world building and the messages in the books, this one it just didn't quite hit the same for me, and it felt very quickly resolved, and there were some things about the ending that felt a little bit convenient as well. So all in all, not really my favourite, only a 3.5 stars, and I'm a bit apprehensive now. Obviously I'm going to continue the series when the next one comes out, I imagine in 22, but at the moment, it's just an okay book for me, and so I'm a bit sad that I started my reading year on a book that was just okay, but at least I finished it and I listened to that on audiobook. And then next I read a science fiction book, and that's one of my goals this year, to read more sci-fi in general, and that is Leviathan Wakes. This is the first book in the Expanse series. I think there are 7 books total, and this follows a guy named Jim Holden. He is an officer of a spaceship, and him and his crew find something in space that is quite suspicious, and then they end up being kind of the linchpin in the middle of this big political galactic scale argument. And one of the characters, Jim Holden, believes in information to be freely given, and then we also have a multiple perspective in here, and the other perspective, or one of them at least, is Detective Miller, and he is not idealized like Jim. He's very much the inverse of that, and so I like their two characters and the different ways that they balanced each other in the book. And I also don't want to say too much about what this plot is because obviously it's very fast paced, and if you like Dresden and its humour and how quick that is, and if you like a high adult fantasy with a lot of world building, I think you're going to really enjoy this, because in this book humans have effectively colonized the solar system, and so you get to hear from Martians who live on Mars, Earthers who obviously live on Earth, people in the belt, which are the asteroid belt, and I love how gravity really played a role in this in terms of people's literal development and physicality, and that led to discrepancies later in culture. And I just love how it was so thought out and it felt very nuanced and detailed. Of course, I loved all the characters in here as well. It got to a certain point in the book where stuff started happening or continued happening rather, and I was very emotionally invested, and I was like, wait, when did this happen? Because it just hooked me. I don't know what else to say. I loved this. I gave it a 4.5 stars. The beginning of it, I was like, because I could take or leave Miller's chapters, but he really grew on me. So that perspective definitely changed. And overall, I just really enjoyed this. And I've gone out and bought the second book, which I haven't shown in a book haul yet, but it is in my February TBR. So I do plan on continuing this series very soon. And I have a review for this book as well, which I will link down below, but 4.5 stars. And then the next book that I finished, I only finished 3 things in January. So this is my last book that I finished, but not the last book that I want to talk about, is Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. It's got little tabbies in here because I wrote a review, so I'm going to be filming that very soon, so keep an eye out for it. I read this years ago, literal years ago, more than 10 I think, and now rereading it, I'm getting so much emotional value. Not that I didn't get that the first time, but I loved rereading this so much. These characters, I didn't realize how much they lived in my heart. I just adored this book, and I can't give too much away about the synopsis because this is a very slow burning book, and Robin Hobb really writes at her own pace. So this is not a book to stick in a readathon. It's not a book to rush through. It's not a series or author to rush through either. Robin Hobb really takes you through her paces, and she sets things out for you in a way that ends up building beautifully, but if you're not invested in the characters, then you won't care about the story. So we follow Fitz in here. He starts out as a 6-year-old boy, and for some people I understand that is off-putting, but he definitely grows in age through the book. So he doesn't stay as a 6-year-old, I promise. So we start off with Fitz, and he is the bastard son of Prince Chivalry, and he ends up being taken in by a stable master named Burch, and he is taken in and looked after because if he is let loose as a bastard child of royalty, he can be taken for ransom or used against the current royal line. So he can effectively unseat them in their royal line because he has a claim to the throne. So they don't want that to happen. They want to keep him close because then they can train him and keep him as they wish and do with him what they want. So he's very much a king's man in that sense. And I love the way the politics and the characters around Fitz really influenced him. It's a really interesting book in terms of identity and character depth and growth and building. And I love how the world building is so like almost a blurred edge around Fitz's character. It really just comes into focus as he starts to experience different things. And it's not sat down and explained to you, it's just integrated into what he's experiencing. So it's a world that felt very real to me, and I feel like I could talk about it and the locations within Buckkeep Castle, which is where Fitz lives, and I could very much tell you how to get somewhere. It just felt very tactile and real to me, and so did all of the characters in here. Unfortunately, my favourite character in this entire series doesn't come in until the second book. So when I finished this and I knew I didn't have any more time in January to read, I was gutted, but that just told me how much I loved this. However, I do want to give this a 5 stars, but unfortunately, because it was such a slow burn, like it was so slow at the beginning, I only really got invested. Well, I got invested because this was a reread for me. If it was my first read, I was trying to analyze it and go, okay, if I'd read this the first time now, I would be interested, but I wouldn't be particularly invested. And the things that have double meanings now, rereading it, because Hobb is very intentional and descriptive, they wouldn't have had those double meanings to me the first time I read it. So I can only give this a 4 stars instead of a 5, but the ending, it really picked up the pace. And so I loved this, I love the characters, I love the world, I love re-experiencing the tidbits of the magic system that we get kind of shown in this book. So I really liked rediscovering those things and those world-building elements and all these characters again, and I was surprised that a lot of the key characters are introduced within the first 20 to 50 pages because I did not remember that about the first read through. But anyway, I could talk about Robin Hobb all day, so I need to stop now. So I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. I will have a review for this one as well, so definitely keep an eye out for it. And now to quickly wrap up what I finished off in 2020. So I read Pink by Lily Wilkinson and I gave this a 3 stars. This is an Australian young adult contemporary book, and it follows a girl named Ava Simpson, and she is going to a new school. She's kind of trying on different identities. This was a queer focused book, but there were some things about the ending that just disappointed me. And while I liked the pace and I felt that the characters' voices were quite authentic for their particular ages, it's just something that generally didn't gel with me because obviously I'm older now, and also I think I just outgrew my taste for this book because I got it a long time ago, and this was one of the books that I was finishing off my reading pile with. And so after I read this, I'd basically finished my TBR pile. So I'm glad that I read it. It is signed to me. I probably will keep it for a while. So I'm happy I finished it, but it's not a favorite. Next up, I was listening to Modoc on audiobook, and this one is a memoir of a circus elephant. So this elephant and this boy are born basically on the same day, a couple of hours apart. The boy's father is an elephant trainer, and so the boy has a special bond with this elephant named Modoc, and I liked what I was listening to of the audiobook, but I wasn't engaged enough to keep reading it, if that makes sense. Memoir is just really outside of my wheelhouse, so it's not really something that I naturally gravitate towards, but it was just a bit of an effort to pick up and keep reading. So I ended up getting about a third into this and then I stopped reading it. So unfortunately it's a DNF, but it's not a DNF because I dislike the book, it's just a DNF because my tastes are very different. And this is signed to me by my grandparents. It's a book that both of them really liked, so I'm not getting rid of it anytime soon. It's kind of like a memento for me, but unfortunately, at the moment in my current reading life, it's not something that I want to pick up, but eventually I will get to it. It's not something that I want to hold myself accountable for though. It's just something that I've got that I anticipate that I'll like sometime in the distant future. And then the last book that I want to wrap up, and then I'll talk about my 2 current reads, is Wicked As You Wish by Rin Chapeko. This is a book that's a young adult urban fantasy, and it's by the same author who wrote The Bone Witch, which is a young adult fantasy. And this one follows a bunch of characters, and a lot of characters at the beginning are introduced. I was kind of doing a bit of a tailspin about all of the names and all of the family and all of the friends and all of the politics and the various world building aspects that were introduced to me. For a while I stuck to this, but I've still got my little tabby in here from when I stopped reading it. I got almost 200 pages into this, so that's like halfway, maybe longer, and I just couldn't vibe with it. I wasn't excited to pick it back up. I don't know if it was the time of year that I was reading it because I just wanted to finish 2020, but I don't know, I just didn't love this, and so I ended up DNFing it, obviously. I wish I could have finished it, but I just wasn't motivated to keep going, and I probably would have given it a 3 stars or a 3.5. So the fact that it was under a 4-star rating for me wasn't really a motivator for me to get up and finish it. So it just wasn't connecting me to the characters, at least what I felt. I wasn't connected to them, so it's just the way it is. That's what happens sometimes, so I DNF'd this one as well. And now for books that I am currently reading. I'm reading 1 audiobook and 1 physical book. The audiobook is Small Favor by Jim Butcher. This is the 10th book in the Dresden Files, and I will have a review for it after I finish reading it, like I have for the rest of them. My Dresden playlist will be linked below. And then I also have another book that I'm reading, and that is The Great Hunt by Robert Jordan. This is the 2nd book in the Wheel of Time, and I've been saying that I'm going to start this at the start of this year, and I have. So I'm holding myself accountable to keep going on this series. I can't say too much about the Wheel of Time. It has those classic fantasy tropes that we all love. It's got the quest, it's got the motley crew, it's got the dark one, it's got a whole bunch of stuff that's going on that's really interesting. And if you like fantasy tropes like that, The Chosen One is another one. If you like all of those things, this writing style is actually really palatable, and I'm surprised that I got through the first book fairly quickly. So I'm enjoying this. It's interesting so far, and I can't say anything about what the beginning is, but I'm liking it, and I will report back because I do plan on doing more content about the Wheel of Time. So as far as this video goes, I've only really read 2 physical books and 1 audiobook. And usually I read a lot more than that in January, but I am working full time and I have really early mornings, so I tend to go to bed not too late either, so I'm not staying up reading like I used to, and my commute isn't ages and ages, so I don't listen to as much audiobooks as before, so I'm kind of having to rediscover how to fit reading into my day again. So when I do that, I imagine I'll devour more audiobooks, but for now I've read 3 books in January. I'm just happy that I got through 3. I set my reading goal for 100 and I'm already like 4 books behind, so I'm kind of just laughing at myself because I don't think that's gonna happen. But anyway, I read 3 books in January. Come and chat to me down below in the comments and let me know what you read in January. I would love to know as always, but thank you so much for watching this video. I'll chat to you in the comments and I'll see you in my next one. Bye.